The fourth bias that we are going to discuss in the module is cognitive ease and cognitive strain. Everyone wants to feel right and feel certain about various things in their life. When we think that we are right and when we feel certain, we experience something called cognitive ease. The world makes sense to us, and that puts us in a good mood. Thus, a cognitive ease is a measure of how easy it is for our brain to process information. The easier it is, the happier and more relaxed we feel. We are more likely to believe something which is A. familiar, B. easy, and C. validates our pre-existing beliefs. When none of these three things are present, we enter into a system which is called cognitive strain. Now, this cognitive strain makes us more vigilant and suspicious about things. It results in a decrease in the confidence level, trust, and pleasure involved in completing a mental action. For example, when shopping during a sale, the way the prices are marked up will greatly affect people's attitudes and interactions with the products. Assume that you are going window shopping in a market and the sale prices in one shop are easy to understand, such as a simple 50% off. In this case, the shopper's brain, that is your brain, will react in an automatic and positive fashion. However, if it's not necessarily easy to work out a complex mathematical equation to understand what the offer is, for example, working out 12.5% of rupees 399, then in such a case, your brain would sit to a mode of cognitive strain. In this case, you will pay more attention to the calculation as well as the real benefits of the offer. And you'll start questioning whether this offer is actually a good deal or not. The more cerebral effort that the marketers demand from their customers, the more negative and suspicious reaction it will evoke from the customers. Now, before moving forward with the implications of cognitive ease and cognitive strain, let's first look at the three determinants of cognitive ease in detail. The first one is familiarity. Now, the concept of familiar things leading our decisions in life is inevitable. Familiarity makes us comfortable and hence puts us at ease. Studies show that men are more likely to marry a woman who has the same characteristics as their own mother. The latter is also true for women marrying men like their own fathers. This familiarity with things simplifies our choices, thereby reducing the efforts that our brain needs to put in for making a decision. Looks like our brain is a lazy fellow. This familiarity can, however, be artificially created. By repeating something over and over again, you can create a sense of familiarity and overall feelings of goodness. Surprisingly, such frequent repetition can be enough to convince our brains to believe things that are not actually true. This phenomenon is called the mere exposure effect, and this can also be misutilized. Things that are familiar seem more truer, and hence teachers, advertisers, marketers, authoritarian tyrants, and even cult leaders repeat their message endlessly. This makes it more familiar and easy to accept. In a 1969 study, a psychologist named Robert Zanjak published an article about a curious study that he had conducted. He posted a silly sounded word like these, as you can see on the screen, on the front page of a student newspaper in University of Michigan every day for several weeks. Now, these words were posted in the newspaper with various frequencies. Then he sent questionnaires to the paper's readers, asking them to guess whether each word referred to something good or referred to something bad. Their answers were consistent, although a little strange. Those words that showed up in print or in paper multiple times or with greater frequency were judged to be more positive than those words that appeared just once or twice. The fact of their repetition gave the words an aura of warmth and trustworthiness. Such a mere exposure to the words actually brought about cognitive ease about the words that were repeated quite frequently, and hence these words were becoming more acceptable to the paper's readers. Coming on to the second element, that is easiness. Information that is difficult to understand is not viewed favorably. Let's perform a small exercise here. Please read the text on my right side. Now please read the text on my left side. Alright, if I ask you now, in which year was Albert Einstein born? What would be your answer? Most of you would answer 1874 or 1870s. However, none of the statements that I showed you was true. The first sentence on my right side, being easy to read, provides us a sense of relaxation, whereas for the second statement, you had to focus more, leading to cognitive strain. Automatically, the first statement is easier to believe, remember, and rely upon. Now, this suggests that a sentence that is printed in clear font or is highlighted will be fluently processed with cognitive ease. Hearing a speaker when you are in a good mood, or even when you have a pencil struck crosswise in your mouth to make you smile, also induces cognitive ease. Conversely, you experience cognitive strain when you read instructions in a poor font, or in faint colors, or in complicated language, or when you are in a bad mood, and even when you frown. Consider this. Psychological studies have found that chairs in companies with easier to pronounce names perform better than those with difficult to pronounce names. The reason is same. People view companies with easy to pronounce names to be much more favorable as compared to those companies which have difficult names. The reason is that easier to pronounce name companies develop a sense of cognitive ease in the minds of the onlooker. This simple bias can also be exploited in making students learn and remember things more easily. As a teacher, we often use colored chalks or markers and highlight important words in notes to make them stand out and ensure that these are read and understood easily. The third element of cognitive ease is validation of our pre-existing beliefs. Information that is consistent or that confirms what we already believe to be true makes us feel right and certain. Thus, we are likely to accept it uncritically. On the other hand, we are more likely to reject information that is inconsistent with what we already believe. We have different standards for evaluating information depending on the level of cognitive ease it generates. Evidence has precious little impact on us if it conflicts with what we believe, simply because the cognitive strain of processing it is too great. Hence, it is easier to believe that what we see is all there is, even after being confronted with evidence that you have missed something that was right in front of your face. Having discussed the determinants of cognitive ease, a natural question arises. What's the need of knowing about this concept? Well, cognitive ease makes us feel more favorable towards things that are familiar, easy to understand, and consistent with our beliefs. Cognitive ease makes content appear more familiar. It reduces uncertainty, which makes people feel more comfortable with their environment and allows the users to rely on their fast, intuitive brain. This means that people are impulsive and trusting when in a state of cognitive ease. We don't have to be even consciously aware that something is familiar to us in order to feel good about it. The feel-good response comes from the conscious part of our brain. A good mood tells us that brain is everything okay and that we can let our guards down. Cognitive ease thus feels good but it gives us a false sense of security. Since we are less vigilant when we are in a good mood, we are more prone to making logical errors. We are more vulnerable to cognitive biases. We think that we understand more than we actually do. And the fun part, we even think that we are thinking, but that's just our intuition at play. There are certain things in life that require cognitive strain, simply because the intuitive choices are sometimes misleading. Cognitive strain enables us to make more careful decisions based on scrutiny, thereby leading to fewer errors. Hence, the next time you think that you are falling into the trap of cognitive ease, when you should actually be more careful, restrain yourself. Evaluate your decisions by keeping them away from the light of familiarity, easiness, and your own beliefs. The fifth bias that we will be covering is the peak end rule and duration neglect. Think about the last time you went on a vacation. What do you remember? Perhaps you remember a particularly beautiful view from the top of a mountain. Maybe you thought about an interesting exhibit you saw at a museum, or a perfect morning on the beach with your family. You might also have pictured the moment when your last trip took a turn for the worse. Maybe you thought of losing your passport or falling ill far from home. Whenever the memories, whether we are happy or miserable, your overall impression of your last vacation likely featured a few particularly strong moments. We remember experiences in our lives as a series of snapshots rather than a complete catalogue of events. Our minds quickly average the moments that most stand out in our memories to form our opinion of the past. The most emotionally peak points of an experience and the end of that experience are heavily weighed in order to remember an event. The peak end rule is a cognitive bias that impacts how people remember past events. Intense positive or negative moments, called the peaks, and the final moments of an experience, called the end, are heavily weighed in our mental calculus. A 1993 study, which laid down the foundation of this rule, found that the human memory is rarely a perfectly accurate record of all the events. Under this experiment, researchers asked participants to put their hand in a tub of cold water under 3 rounds. Round 1 consisted of holding the hand in water for 60 full seconds at 14 degrees Celsius. Round 2 consisted of holding the hand in water for 60 seconds at 14 degrees Celsius, followed by 30 seconds at 15 degrees Celsius. Under round 3, the participants were given an option to choose between repeating option 1 or option 2. Now, the most logical choice for participants would have been to repeat the round 1. Since water is still unpleasantly chilly at 15 degrees Celsius, so it have been rational to choose 60 seconds of discomfort under round 1 instead of 90 whole seconds of discomfort under round 2. As it turns out, the slightly less uncomfortable final 30 seconds of the experiment changed how people perceived the entirety of round 2. 80% of the participants preferred round 2 and chose to repeat the condition in the final trial. A small improvement near the end of the experience radically shifted people's perception of that particular event. Not only this, but the duration of the suffering was totally neglected by the participants. This duration neglect is a critical component of the peak end theory. Our memories are defined by the intense moments or the peaks as well as the ending, rather than how we feel most of the time of the experience. Research also indicates that the length of the time of an experience has little effect on our real memory. Daniel Kahneman attributes this cognitive tendency to our evolutionary purposes. As per him, Memory was not designed to measure the ongoing happiness or total suffering. For survival purposes, you don't need to put a lot of weight on the duration of experiences. It's just how bad they are and whether they end well. That is really the information that you need as an organism. Results from the cold water submersion study were also confirmed in an experiment using unpleasant noises. Participants under this study were exposed to a series of irritating noises of various levels of numbness. The later recall of a loud noise was improved by adding a period of diminishing volume. After the study, participants were asked to rate the overall amount of pleasantness or unpleasantness of the various rounds of noises. The result: the experience of 16 seconds at 78 decibels was rated worse by the participants than the same experience of 16 seconds at 78 decibels followed by 8 extra seconds at 66 decibels. Shocking. Yet another study discovered that children were more pleased after receiving a chocolate treat alone rather than receiving the same chocolate treat followed by a mildly enjoyable piece of gum. Children preferred only the chocolate bar, even though it was 1 versus 2 treats. This is because their retrospective assessments were more impacted by the end of the experience. Providing the gum after the treat of chocolate caused the experience as a whole to be less pleasurable for the children. These studies have strengthened the premise that the peak end rule is everywhere. Just most of the time we are not conscious of how much our experience is shaped by the peak and ending of an experience. Now, an easier way to interpret this is to understand the two selves as described by Kahneman again. These two selves are the experiencing self and the narrating self. The experiencing self is our moment-to-moment awareness and being present. This mode of thinking is intuitive, quick, and unconscious. The experiencing self does not remember events. The narrating self, on the other hand, weaves our experience into a coherent story. The narrating self is essentially our curator. It goes over our experiences with a thick eraser and red pencil to mark the important ones. The narrating self takes the input from the experiencing self, edits it, and creates a memory. This narrating self heavily sorts out what finally makes it into our memory. And hence, what gets remembered are significant, intense moments of the experience, regardless of the length of time. The length of time of an experiment does not get interpreted in a narrating self. For an evolutionary perspective, for example, we don't need to know how long a bear attacked us. The only thing we need to know is if it was a bad experience and if it ended well. This is the information that leads us to best able to avoid another bear attack in the future, and thus this is the information that our brain is wired to store. The peak end rule has simple ramifications for our decision-making process. It points to us that our memory may not always be a reliable source when describing an entire event experience. As a result, we are bound to give a biased feedback, taking into account only the peaks and ends of our experience. Even when we think that we are recalling facts about an experience, our recollection of events is typically incomplete and heavily dependent upon the feelings that we were having during that experience. At the same time, you can also use this rule to your advantage by ensuring that your experiences end on a happy note, or that there are more positive peaks even if they are for small duration. You can ensure that you have a happy and vivid memory of your entire experience. In this manner, it's also a great tool for marketers to create good experiences for their products and services. So, The next time you go on a vacation or a concert or any event for that matter, try to write down or record the entire experience so that when your friend asks for an honest feedback, you can give an unbiased opinion. Coming on to the last cognitive bias for our module, the halo effect and the horn effect. Now, if you ever look closely at your evaluation of other people, more often than not, you would find that when you meet someone, the first impression plays a huge role. If the first impression of that person is very positive, you tend to ignore their negative characteristics and concentrate only on the positive ones. You start seeing the person in the halo of the positive first impression. On the other hand, if your first impression of a person is negative, you tend to ignore their positive characteristics and concentrate only on the negative ones. You tend to see that person in the light of the negative first impression, and hence there is a higher probability that you will not like that person. The first effect is called the halo effect, and the second one is called the horn effect. In simple words, these two cognitive biases that cause you to allow one trait, either good or bad, to overshadow all other traits, behaviors, actions, or beliefs are called the halo effect and horn effect, respectively. In psychology, halo effect and horn effect happen all the time. Attractive people, on an average, are thought to be more intelligent, even though this isn't true. Overweight people are thought to be lazy, which is not necessarily the case. These are two of the most powerful and potentially harmful mental modes that you would encounter in your life. They can counter your judgment and can cause you to make substandard decisions or hold irrational beliefs. And hence, it's necessary for you to understand them and train yourself to actively fight against them. The origins of these effects date back to 1920s through a simple study performed by psychologist Edward Thorndike. Under the study, he asked two high-ranking officers to evaluate their soldiers on physical qualities such as neatness and mental qualities such as intellect and leadership. The results of the studies showed that if a soldier was rated high in one area, he also tended to be rated high in all other areas. Years later, in another experiment, researchers divided students from the University of Michigan into two groups. Then, they showed each group a different video of the same professor. In one video, the professor seemed to be kind, while in the other video, he seemed to be rude and authoritarian. After the viewing was done with, researchers instructed the students to describe the professor in their own words. Interestingly enough, the students who saw the video of the kind professor described him as an attractive-looking man. The other group, however, said that the professor had an unpleasant experience and appearance as well. This interesting experiment shows how your perception of another person affects your judgment to an unexpected level. This effect applies to a number of situations. Firstly, in the classroom, teachers are subject to the halo effect rating error when evaluating their students. For example, a teacher who sees a well-behaved student might tend to assume that this student is also bright, diligent, and engaged, even before that teacher has actually objectively evaluated the student's capacity in all these areas. When these types of halo effects occur, they can actually affect the student's grades as well. The halo or horn effect can influence how teachers treat their students, but it can also impact how students perceive the teachers to be. In one study, researchers found that when an instructor was viewed as warm and friendly, students also rated him as more attractive, appealing, and likable. Another common situation where this effect shows its presence is during the hiring process and the performance appraisal process at a workplace. During the hiring process, If the interviewer has first bad impression of a candidate, they might write them off or ignore their subsequent positive traits. During the performance appraisal process, most managers would like to think that they are being as fair as possible when it comes to completing the reviews about their subordinates. Many tend to spend hours poring over each comment and each score of their subordinates. But when they step back, most probably they will witness that almost all of their high performance consistently score high in all categories, or almost all of the low performance scored low in every category. In such a case, these managers might be falling victim to the halo or horn effect. A 2007 study highlights that bias during a selection process. Participants to a study were shown pictures of the same man who was introduced as an investment broker. One picture showed a suited man with a highly regarded degree, and the other showed the same man in casual clothing with a degree from a nondescript college. The participants were then asked how much of a hypothetical $1,000 they would invest in each one of the investment broker. The participants rated the suited man as more competent. On average, he got $535 without even having his background checked. On the contrast, the casual dresser received just $355. Not only were the participants more likely to have the second broker's credentials verified, but also they did not consider to be trustworthy. In the marketing arena, marketers take advantage of the halo effect to sell their products and services to the customers. When a celebrity spokesperson endorses a particular item, our positive evaluation of that individual can spread to our perceptions of the product itself. When this effect applies to food, it's called the health halo effect. This happens when we overestimate the health benefits of a product based on our perception of how healthy we think it to be. This effect works for companies that claim to be healthy, like Subway. People tend to underestimate how calorific Subway food is relative to a chain like the McDonald's. This in turn leads to higher calorie purchases for these establishments by the customers. Politicians, film stars, sportspersons, celebrities, and brand managers all have learned to construct a halo effect and capitalize on their reputations. So, how are you, as teachers, managers, and consumers, supposed to deal with this bias? Staying alert and conscious of your perceptions, structuring an interview beforehand, documenting all the aspects of performances of your subordinates throughout the year, and analyzing what you actually need to analyze. These are some of the basic ways to tackle this bias. In your personal life as well, being aware of the horn effect can help you avoid prejudice when you meet new people. Choosing to be more open and objective can lead you to build many new relationships. This brings us near the end of this module. Although our brain is made up of 100 billion neurons, but it would have been pretty clear by now that our brain does not have the capacity to store every bit of information that it is exposed to. The limitations of our brain therefore makes it vulnerable to various biases. These biases creep up during the decision-making process. There are more than 100 cognitive biases that impact the capability of our brain to make fair judgments. This course has exposed you to 6 main cognitive biases with the intention of making you aware of yourself and your decisions. As laid down at the beginning of this video, these biases are not always bad. Some of them have actually enabled you to think and act quickly in times of danger, thereby ensuring your survival. Our ability to rely on our intuition and gut feeling is one of the powers that we as humans are blessed with. However, An understanding of these biases enable us to take informed decisions and even use them to have an edge for undertaking marketing and financial decisions. Now, it's up to you to decide whether and to what extent would you be willing to continue to trust your brain's decision making process. Thank you.